So this is a continuation or like sister piece to the video where I talked about how gun control has changed in the US and like the origins of it. So to be honest, I wasn't planning on doing this video, but as I read more about gun control, it really made me think like, if gun control, why mass shootings? And like, will gun control solve mass shootings and all of that? You know, it's a very, obviously very hot topic issue in America. And let me preface this video as well by saying I'm not a constitutional lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a historian, I'm not an expert, but I'm navigating my way through this space as someone who, on one hand, does think that these acts of violence with guns are horrible, but also believes in my right to stand up against tyrannical government and like shooting guns for hobby, right? So finding that space can be very difficult, I'm sure, for many people. And I'm sure there are conservatives too who are pro-gun but are like, what the fuck is going on? Why is there senseless killing? Like, I don't think that's a liberal thought to think, hey, maybe kids shouldn't die, you know? All that said, again, I wrote this like a paper, you know, I had to get my thoughts out, and I don't want to speak to it just from memory because I want to accurately portray the thoughts and the things that I looked up. So I will be reading off a teleprompter. So please bear with me if it looks like I'm not looking at you. I'm also looking at myself right now. Anyway, I'm not even looking at you. Let me look at you. So let's see how this goes. I understand it's a very hot topic issue. I understand that I may face a lot of scrutiny, and I don't think it can be solved as easily as we want it to be, which is the unfortunate truth. So here we go. So mass shootings have become an all too familiar reality in the United States. To date, we have over 400 million guns in circulation and a patchwork of laws trying to regulate them. And yet, despite the discussion and debates, these tragedies still continue to happen. So why? What's really behind this? The definition of a mass shooting varies depending on the source, but generally it's an event where 4 or more people are shot or killed, excluding the shooter. Different organizations like the FBI have stricter criteria, but the result is the same. Mass shootings are happening at an alarming rate. I want to first talk about the people committing these acts. When we take a look at the shooters in these high-profile cases, there are some clear patterns that emerge. 96% of mass shooters are men. And while the racial breakdown varies, we see that 54% of them are white, 17% are black, 9% are Latino, and 6% are Asian. The other 14%, it's just undeclared. So these numbers can tell us something about who is committing these acts, but they don't fully explain why. One thing that stands out is that many of these individuals were known to law enforcement before the shootings happened. Let me say that again. Many of these individuals were known to law enforcement before the shooting happened. This might be through tips from the FBI or because family members themselves had raised concerns. A lot of these shooters had histories of mental health issues or domestic abuse. That's important because it shows there are warning signs and we're not doing enough to act on them. Now, I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment, and I believe in the right to own firearms. I don't think the solution is to take away people's guns, but I also agree with some reasonable gun control, especially when we're talking about people who should not have access to firearms. It's about finding the balance. So there was a report from the Rockefeller Institute of Government that sheds light about how these shootings often start. It's not usually just random acts of violence. It's usually fueled by a deep personal grievance, something real like losing a job or relationship, or something perceived like paranoia or delusional thinking. Whatever the cause, this grievance festers and the person becomes fixated. They start fantasizing about taking violent action to resolve it. They also talk about this concept called leakage. It's when the person or the perpetrator's thoughts start to spill over and they cannot keep it to themselves. Sometimes they tell others directly, sometimes they post about it on social media, or sometimes they write it in a journal. It's like they give a warning signal, but oftentimes it's not caught in time. In fact, studies show that more than 75% of school shooters communicated their intentions ahead of time. Anecdotally, when I was in junior high, there were bomb threats that happened at my school. How did we know they happened? Someone was writing them on the stalls in the bathroom. We got evacuated maybe 3 or 4 times, and it turns out it was not a bomb, to my knowledge, that they were building, but it did turn out that they were planning to shoot our school. I mean, one of the kids was hospitalized because they were practicing using their firearms and he got shot in the stomach. And this was in junior high. I was maybe 11 or 12. But my school did take those threats credibly. They evacuated us when it was mentioned, and nothing ever happened save for the one kid who was gonna shoot everyone getting shot himself. He survived. It's very interesting. I truthfully didn't even think about that relevance to this conversation until I started speaking on it. But yeah, that happened in my junior high. So back on the tangent. The pattern of leakage, right? It is true for mass shootings outside of schools as well. They have shown that these people are saying ahead of time, hey, like, this is where I'm at. And it's not a secret. They're telling us what they're planning. And maybe we're just not taking them seriously, or maybe we're just not paying attention. So what do we need to stop this from happening? I think we need to start by educating about what leakage looks like first, how to recognize warning signs and how to report them. You know, after 9/11, the government launched the If You See Something, Say Something campaign. We need to make it absolutely clear that reporting suspicious behavior is not just encouraged, it's critical. Platforms like Safe to Tell, which allows people to anonymously report tips, have shown that this approach works. In one school year alone, over 11,000 tips were reported, and 95% of them were actionable. That's huge. And it proves that if people know how and where to report threats, they will. But education and reporting alone doesn't cut it. We need to have community-based threat assessment teams, groups that include law enforcement, mental health professionals, and school officials. These teams can work together to assess threats, share information, and make sure nothing slips through the cracks. Another big failure in preventing mass shootings is the failure of red flag laws. These laws are supposed to allow law enforcement to confiscate firearms from people who are deemed a threat. But in several tragic cases, they've failed. In 2017, for example, a domestic violence conviction and a court-martial were never entered into the background checking system for gun purchasing. This allowed the shooter in Sutherland Springs to legally purchase firearms and kill 26 people. In the Parkland shooting, the FBI received a credible tip. Still 17 people died. This failure needs to be addressed because if we're going to have red flag laws, they need to be enforced properly. Another reason that these laws fail is because how they're applied in different states. Only 31 states have red flag laws, and enforcement can vary widely. Sometimes law enforcement doesn't act on them, or people are afraid to report potential threats because they fear the social stigma or the consequences of involving authorities. But let me be super clear. Gun control isn't the whole picture here. And truth be told, it might sound pessimistic, but even if we had laws that passed that said, hey, everyone in the whole country, put your guns in this box, we're gonna ship them into the sun, I do think gun violence will still exist. I think it is Pandora's box that has been opened, and unfortunately, I think the reality is that we can't put it away. And so I think we have to address some of the other things that contribute to these incidents, and maybe we can help prevent the possibility. So with that said, America has a serious mental health crisis. And part of that is because America has a serious healthcare crisis. Mental health care and American healthcare is incredibly expensive. It's fragmented and it's severely underfunded. And while it's true that most people with mental health issues are not violent, untreated conditions combined with isolation and easy access to firearms can and has been deadly. Our current mental health system is stretched incredibly thin, and people who are suffering often fall through the cracks. Honestly, mental health is still very stigmatized, especially in the communities of people who are more prone to be a mass shooter. Many mass shooters are dealing with mental health issues, but we aren't providing them the care that can help them before they become a danger to others. We also have to look at social alienation. Many mass shooters experience bullying, rejection, and isolation. They often turn inward rather than ask for help outward. And again, I think that speaks to the stigma of asking for help and mental health issues in America. And, they might turn to online for echo chambers, right? It only further radicalizes them and fuels their anger and fixation if they're in an echo chamber of other people who are encouraging that behavior. These types of communities, they can breed violence. And let's not also forget the media. There is a serious issue with what's called the contagion effect. The more attention that a shooter gets, the more likely others are to follow in their footsteps. We see this in the coverage of mass shootings. And that's why I think it's important never to acknowledge the shooter's name or anything like that, because we don't want to give them any acknowledgement, period. But it's like a cycle, right? The more notoriety a shooter gains, the more likely others will try to imitate them. Some countries have addressed this by limiting the amount of media coverage on shooters. But I want to be super clear here. Even in countries with strict gun laws, mass violence and casualties can still happen. In China, a knife attack injured 37 children. In the UK, the Ariana Grande bombing killed 22 people. And in Japan, a devastating arson attack took 36 lives. Mass violence isn't just about guns, it's about something deeper, an underlying crisis in society, both here and other places. But when it comes to gun laws in the US, there are real issues. There are loopholes, right? So no universal background checks for private sales. There's gun show loopholes. And then there's the rise of ghost guns that can evade regulation. These gaps in our system can certainly make it easier for dangerous individuals to get their hands on firearms. I believe in the right to own guns, but I also think that we need common sense reforms to make sure those who shouldn't have them don't. In the end, I don't believe gun laws alone can fix the problem. Sure, we can help reduce the access to the firearms, but it's not going to fix the underlying issues like mental health, social disconnection, and the glorification of violence. If we want to see real change, we have to tackle these root causes head on. We need to create a culture of support, empathy, and intervention. So yeah, gun control matters. But mental health care, community connection, and addressing cultural issues around violence matters too. Until we fix the underlying issues, we'll keep seeing the same problems repeat itself. And I sometimes liken it to Western medicine, right? Western medicine, perfect at treating the symptom, but we never look at the problem. Feel the same about this, right? We're looking at a symptom, but what is the problem? And like I said, this isn't gospel. This isn't what every leftist or progressive thinks. This isn't what every centrist, it's not what anyone else has to think, right? This is what I think. This is my view. And I thought it might be interesting to share where I'm at as a progressive leftist who owns guns, but also does acknowledge that there's an increase in mass shootings in this country, and that's not cool. So let me take this time to say, it's cool to go to therapy. Ask your friends for help. It's okay to feel isolated and down and sad about the world, because the world kind of sucks a lot of the time. But let's talk about it. Let's destigmatize talking about it. It's okay to feel that way, and it's okay to ask for help. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, I'm sure it's going to breed a lot of contention in the comments, so I am awaiting cautiously, but I will read and reply to whatever I can. Thank you. Goodbye.